OpTic, the North American powerhouse, the team that many consider the best of the pre-franchising era, along with the greatest player in Valorant history. Loud, the Brazilian super team, built from the ground up with veterans and youngsters alike, created to show just how much talent their region has, equal in series, equal in maps. Both have a story of being so close to the crown, having it ripped away from them, then finally reaching success, but at the cost of each other. I'm Commend, and this is the greatest rivalry in Valorant, and why from next year, it won't ever be the same. This story begins back in 2021, before either Loud or OpTic had entered Valorant esports. Team Envy had just made a new roster change, bringing in Ye, the former star duelist of Andbox. It was clear that he had potential, and it showed in the North American playoffs. Sentinels still looked dominant, but Envy went on a lower bracket run, reaching 3rd place and, more importantly, taking a spot in Masters Berlin. At the tournament, they not only cemented themselves as the new best team in NA, with 2-0 wins over both Sentinels and 100 Thieves, but also had dominant showings over Crew and Vivo Keyed. Ye was quickly establishing himself as one of the best players in the world, seemingly smurfing on top international teams. With 4 wins out of 4, they made it to the grand final, against the Gambit team who looked unstoppable. And they really were. From winning every map to losing 3-0 in convincing fashion, Envy missed out on 1st place. Ye somehow still went positive across the series though. They left Berlin disappointed, but knew that they'd qualified to Champions that was happening in a few months, the biggest Valorant tournament yet. Another team that qualified to Champions 2021 was Vikings. Vikings were a Brazilian team who'd made it to the first global Valorant event, Masters Reykjavik, but had only managed to pick up 1 win before bowing out. It was made up of Brazilian esports veterans, 2 of those being Sacy and Sadak. They were one of 3 Brazilian teams who had qualified, alongside Furia and Vivo Keyed, but expectations were pretty low coming into the tournament for all of them, with NA and EMEA teams looking dominant. Envy and Vikings never directly matched up at Champions, but they had very similar tournament experiences. Both teams were the favourites for their first match and won 2-0, but lost the second upper bracket game to the eventual grand finalists, Ascend and Gambit respectively. Vikings were on the brink of actually beating Gambit, up 12-5 on the 3rd map, with 7 chances at match point, but there's a reason that Gambit were considered the best in the world at that time, and they denied Vikings entry into the playoffs with a 7-round comeback. Going into the lower bracket games, both Envy and Vikings would have been considered the favourites to win and make it to playoffs. Envy were up against X10, a team they'd already beaten 2-0, but Ye had finally met his match in Patapan, and a legendary comeback on the final map from X10, with this iconic moment, knocked Envy out of the tournament. Vikings were facing Team Secret, one of the lowest rated teams coming in, but again, an incredible duelist player in Dubstep took his team to the playoffs in dominant fashion, leaving Vikings in the dust. Both Envy and Vikings had underwhelming champions runs, and were determined not to repeat that failure again. Coming into 2022, Envy confirmed their merger with OpTic, and so the NA team had rebranded for the new season. They didn't make any roster changes, and they didn't need to. They'd already proven that this squad had the potential to reach the top level of international competition, and so stuck with FNS, Crashies, Victor, Marved, and Ye. Over in Brazil, there was a new organisation looking to join Valorant, one with significant financial backing and a pretty loud fanbase. At the same time, a new free agent team began to make a name for themselves in Brazilian challenges, with a flawless run through the closed qualifier. Pancada Amigos was a roster comprised of veterans Sacy and Sadak, along with 3 younger players in Les, a sentinel player who carried like a duelist, Aspas, an untrained ranked demon, and of course Pancada, one of the most promising smokes players in Brazil. The formula of veterans combined with cracked youngsters has worked in many other teams across the world, so Loud saw the potential of this roster and jumped on it almost immediately, signing them for 2022. And with this huge organisation now backing them, Loud began their utter dominance of the Brazilian region. They finished 1st in Brazilian challenges, only dropping a single map in the group stage and playoffs combined, sweeping NIP 3-0 in both the upper final and grand final. They were the undisputed best team in Brazil, and many began to call them a super team. Others wanted to wait and see how they performed internationally, and the team would get their chance to show just how good they really were at Masters Reykjavik in April. OpTic didn't have as much of a smooth ride to qualify however, losing their opening match to Rise in NA Challengers groups. They eventually brought their record to 3-2, qualifying for playoffs, where they kept winning, making it into the grand final against a red-hot Guard. The Guard beat them in a very close series to take the top NA seed away from OpTic, but they'd still qualified to Reykjavik. Heading into the event, OpTic wanted to prove that Champions was just a blunder, that they could still compete at the top level. Loud wanted to prove that their region could produce a winning team, and end the era of NA and EMEA dominance. Because Loud had finished top of their region, they qualified straight to the playoffs, but OpTic had to tough it out in groups. After a loss to Xerxia in their opening match, they powered up to take down Crew and Xerxia in the rematch. Playoffs were next, and in the first round, OpTic took down NA rivals The Guard, and Loud won a convincing series over Liquid. In the upper semis, OpTic played another close series, this time against DRX, winning the final map 15-13 to advance to the winners finals. Could Loud do the same against G2? Sacy and Aspas said yes, taking the team into the upper finals. OpTic vs Loud, their first meeting. Win this and you're in the grand finals, with a shot at the trophy. The first map was Fracture, which had been OpTic's playground so far in the tournament with Victor on Neon, and this match was no different. Loud were dismantled, losing 13-2 on map 1. It seemed the series was over. To bring yourself back from a loss like that would take mental strength only esports veterans would possess. Luckily, Loud had a few of those, and so took Ascent 13-8, winning 8 out of 9 defensive rounds in the second half. Icebox was the final map, and was anyone's for the taking, so the youngest player in the server decided to step up and take it himself. Les went huge on Icebox, dropping 33 kills on Viper to carry Loud to a 13-11 win. Loud and Brazil had made it to an international grand final, with an entire region pushing them to go all the way. After that loss, OpTic dropped into the lower final against the Zeta Division team on the underdog run of their life, a dangerous opponent for anyone. Marved single-handedly won OpTic Haven, dropping 35 kills, and after narrowly avoiding disaster there, dealt with the Japanese team calmly on Fracture and Bind. OpTic had brought it to a rematch in the grand finals, their second meeting, this time for the trophy. Ascent was first, and OpTic wanted to prove whose defensive side was really better, and they did so with the 10-2 half, and Ye going 17-4. But with the side switch, Loud began to mount a comeback, and got the score back to 11-9, with OpTic on a low bye. Aspas gets the opening kill, and it looks to be another easy round for Loud, but something has slipped through the net. Or rather, someone. Marved lurks up through mid and waits for his opportunity, which comes in the form of Aspas. He then plays around his spawn smoke perfectly to net 2 more kills, and then takes out pancada before the retake can even start. When Marved is playing like that, it's hard to put any controller in the world above him, and hard for OpTic to lose. They won another round to take Ascent 13-9, but Loud so nearly made the comeback. It was a similar story on Bind, with OpTic going up 8-4 but Loud bringing the score even. They win round 23 to take the lead 12-11. One more round and they take map 2, but an ace from Victor denies them the game, and 2 more insane rounds from him and Ye secures another map win for OpTic. Loud would have to reverse sweep this series to win the trophy, but if they were going to do it, they had the perfect scenario. Next up was Breeze, OpTic's usual permaban, but with Loud coming in from the upper bracket, they got to ban 2 maps instead of the usual 1 each. The only time OpTic had played Breeze before this was against the Guard in their domestic grand final, where they got 13-2'd. On any other day, Loud would have won this map comfortably, but when OpTic are feeling it, they can win any game. After 8-4 attacking halves for both teams, another intense overtime ensued. Each round, a trophy was in the balance. Consecutive 4Ks from pancada and FNS left the score at 14-13 OpTic, and in a 3v4 retake, they finally broke through. OpTic had become the new best team in the world, taking another trophy home for North America. Loud put up an incredible showing for their first international tournament, but coming second always comes with disappointment. Both teams travelled back home, hungry to repeat their success in Copenhagen, which was only a few months away. Both teams qualified comfortably for Copenhagen, but OpTic lost to XSET in the grand finals of NA Challengers, and Crew beat NIP in the South American playoff match, so both Loud and OpTic would be placed in the group stage. Not only that, but they were in the same group: Guild, OpTic, Crew, and Loud. OpTic and Loud were the favourites to make it out, but it wouldn't quite go as they planned. Guild 2-0'd OpTic in the first match, and Crew beat Loud 2-1 to knock them both down into an elimination game, their third meeting, from a grand final to facing group stage elimination. OpTic knew what it felt like to go out in groups from last year's champions, and they weren't going to let it happen again. But after Loud took Ascent, it seemed to be slipping away. Could the world champions really exit the tournament in 12th place? Not yet at least, because Loud still couldn't deal with Victor's Neon on Fracture. It all came down to the final map. Split came next, and Loud quickly took a strong lead, going up 7-3. But if you know Split, you know that defending is typically a lot easier than attacking, so OpTic were able to win round after round, bringing the score to 12-11 in their favour. One round, and Loud, Brazil's only team at Copenhagen, were out.
They don't know where he is! He still gets away with it!
These guys just love overtimes, huh? OpTic go for an A hit in the first round of OT, and with Marved lurking behind them, Loud concede an all-important defensive round. All OpTic had to do was win a single round to advance in Copenhagen. After Loud's timeout, they go for the B site through Heaven. FNS's Fade Seas catches Sadak, taking him down to 1 HP as Aspas's nade is ending, a tragic team kill that means the end of the tournament for Loud, and the end of hope for Brazil. OpTic stayed alive in the tournament by beating Crew, and went on a similar run to Reykjavik, beating an NA team and DRX in the upper playoff bracket to make it to winners finals. They weren't destined to repeat their win though, losing to a hyper-aggressive PaperX and slow methodical FPX to finish in 3rd place. Neither team looked as good as they did in Reykjavik, and left Copenhagen with something to prove at Champions Istanbul, the biggest Valorant tournament yet. Coming into Champions, it was clear that the OpTic Loud story would continue as they were once again placed in the same group. But before they could face each other again, they had to take out Boom and Zeta. Neither of the favourites faltered this time around though, with both OpTic and Loud making it to winners, their 4th meeting. This wasn't their highest stake match, as the loser could still make it to playoffs through the lower bracket of the group, but their pride was on the line. Loud came out strong with an 11-1 defensive half on Breeze, but Fracture was still OpTic's territory. Pearl was the final map, as Champions was the first major tournament where it was played. How would the teams look on a completely new battlefield? OpTic were the quickest to adapt, and dominated Pearl 13-3, advancing to the playoffs early. Loud would have to beat Zeta to do the same, and they did so 2-0, giving them another shot at glory. Playoffs at Champions was probably the most stacked bracket ever in Valorant. The undisputed best teams from each region, battling it out to become the best team in the world. The opening game of playoffs was the matchup between two South American giants, Loud and Leviathan. The teams were pretty evenly matched coming in. Leviathan looked incredible in the group stage, beating Team Liquid and PaperX, winning every single pistol round in the process. This would be Loud's first major test, and on Icebox, they failed. Down 12-6 on a terrible bye, it was practically over. But in the back of Sacy and Sadak's minds were when they were up 12-5 on Icebox, all the way back at Champions 2021. Gambit made that comeback, so why couldn't they? 1 round, 2 rounds, 3, 4, 5, 6, and suddenly they'd clawed it back. With their newfound momentum, they took the next 2 rounds, making it 8 in a row, to win Icebox 14-12, and then carried it through to Haven to take the series 2-0. This comeback showed Loud's composure under pressure, an attribute that would take them far in the tournament. But before that, on the other side of playoffs, OpTic took on Liquid. They were expected to take this match cleanly, but after a shaky start and a 13-7 map loss, it was doubtful. But we know how well OpTic stabilised, and with 2 quick 13-8s, they were through to winners semis. One more win for either team would put them through to the winners finals, a place familiar for both. The next opponents for Loud would be DRX, who had just come off the back of playing probably the greatest map ever in Valorant versus FPX. They looked to repeat it against Loud, up 9-3 after the first half of Breeze. But once again, Loud showed their resilience. They didn't even need overtime. They won the second half 10-2 and took the map 13-11. DRX's mental was broken, and with Loud's Haven continually improving, the Koreans were no match for the Brazilians and Loud took it 13-6, adding another 2-0 to their list. They'd made it, back to the winners finals. Now it was OpTic's turn, and they'd have to defeat the rejuvenated xeppaa. OpTic had one major thing over them though, and that was experience. It showed in this series, and OpTic showed once again how dominant their Pearl is, winning the match 2-1 and advancing in winners. This was a familiar sight to many. OpTic versus Loud, winners finals, their 5th meeting. Players perform better or worse on any given day, and for this match, it seemed like all of Loud was online and most of OpTic weren't. This was especially true for FNS, who had a -20 KD across the series. When your IGL isn't performing, the team's coordination can be skewed, and OpTic looked lost in this upper final, especially on Ascent map 2, which they lost 13-3.
Mid, they have 40 seconds to play with. Aspas, he lights them up! A collapse that has probably put OpTic to bed here. Crash is even taken to half HP, and it's left onto him to try and clutch this out. But Aspas has had enough. A knife needed to be connected, but instead it's less to put them down. Loud dominate OpTic to make their way through to the final.
Loud were headed to a second grand final, whilst OpTic would have to win a series against another team on a fairy tale run, DRX. DRX had finally broken the 5th-6th place curse that had haunted them at every global event, and secured top 3 after beating FPX again. It'd be a tough matchup for OpTic, but it seemed like they had it under control after winning the first 2 maps in the best of 5. With Fracture next, OpTic could have taken the series in 3 maps, but Mako had other ideas, dropping 27 kills to win Fracture. The Korean Jet made a return on Ascent too, with Buzz going 26-12, bringing it to a map 5. If DRX won the next map, it would be the first reverse sweep in a best of 5 in Valorant history, so of course, it was a banger. Eventually, OpTic emerged as the victors though, setting up a final rival match in the Grand Finals of Champions. Loud, OpTic, Grand Finals of Champions 2022. With no maps lost in the playoffs so far, Loud were confident that this would be their time, but Masters Reykjavik stayed in the back of Brazilian minds, while the entire region urged them to bring home a trophy. The first map was Ascent, where both teams were comfortable. Even though Loud had beaten them 13-3 the match before, it was clear that OpTic weren't playing at their best in that game. With both teams locked in, who would come out on top? After the first half, OpTic was slightly leading, but Loud were headed into the defense, their preferred side. However, Ye had decided to switch away from Chamber on this map and onto Jet for more entry power, something Loud weren't prepared for. OpTic took the pistol, but Loud bounced back with 3 rounds. OpTic then won 3 more in a row to make it 12-8. Loud would need to show some incredible resilience to come back from this, but everyone knew they had it. The resilience that got them to the winners finals in Reykjavik, that pushed them to become even better after losing out at Copenhagen, that let them make miracle comebacks against Leviathan and DRX, that let them win Ascent. Loud took it 15-13, with sacy going 32-15. His veteran presence allowed Loud to ascend. Bind was next, another map that had gone back and forth between the teams over 2022, but OpTic wouldn't let that happen again. FNS was definitely online for this game, calling a 10-2 attack half, which became a 13-6 win. Aspas also got a nasty 1v3, but it didn't bring them back into it. All tied up. The next map was Breeze, which OpTic fluctuated on. Sometimes they destroyed teams on it, and others they just couldn't figure it out. But how would it look in the most important game of the tournament? 7 rounds later, they had a 6-1 lead, so it was a good Breeze day for them. Not good enough though, as Loud brought back the remaining 5 rounds of the half and it ended 6-6. From there, they traded rounds back and forth, neither team letting the other get away. It just had to go to overtime. The pattern continued though, 1 round to OpTic, 2 to Loud, another to OpTic, 14-14. A quick A hit nets Loud another, and OpTic takes some inspiration and go for the same.
A laboured spray, but he holds on! Back to the wall! He still holds on! And now it's all on Crashies! 3 players to find, a spike to plant, and only 50 seconds to do something about it. That's what he's desperate for. Another attempt and another death! And no more OTs, Loud! Finally get across the line here, but this is a marathon of a game, Mike.
Loud take their second map in another OT, only 1 more to be crowned champions. And what goes well with a Loud overtime win? Haven.
Needs to stay cool, and he's done well with 1, but it's not going to be enough. As sacy now in the 1v2, Plant going to come in, but they are closing the gap fast to save Plant, but then now this player's on long. Did he note the one close through Garage? He absolutely has! And with 40 HP, he's done the unthinkable! He's taken them to 12! And now 1 round away!
Loud dominated OpTic in the final map of Haven, even getting an ace from less. Every player from Loud was online in this match, veterans and youngsters alike. But from that point onwards, they were all veterans. They had finally proven that Brazil was a powerful region in Valorant, shown their skills on the world stage, and were taking a trophy home to millions of fans. This brought the Rivalry score to 3 all-in series, 9 all-in maps. A perfect way to end it for Loud, and although OpTic were disappointed with 2nd place, they were the most consistent team of 2022, and created a rivalry with Loud that will be talked about in Valorant for years to come. And it might continue, just not in the same way. OpTic didn't make it into franchising, and as a result, the team is split up. Ye has signed for C9 and Marved is retiring, but the other players have gone to NRG, so the new rivalry could be Loud versus NRG. The other problem though is that Loud have also made some roster changes. Sacy and Pancada have moved to Sentinels for next season, being replaced by Cowanzine and Tuis. Neither team in the rivalry have kept their full roster, which means it's pretty much over, but that doesn't mean it hasn't been legendary. And who knows, maybe a new international rivalry will be born in Sao Paulo. I'd love to see it. I want to give a huge thanks to Flynn for helping me translate this into Portuguese for the Brazilian fans. The passion that I see from your region is amazing, and I'm sure we'll feel it in the crowd next year. Speaking of Sao Paulo, I'm hoping to get watch party rights for it, so like, subscribe, and let's make it happen. I've been Commend, hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.